Hey, Sack Attack. Can you hear me all right? It looks like the delay is more like 30 seconds. That's all right. We'll just have a slow, awkwardly delayed conversation, at least until other people show up. This is actually my last weekend in Boston before I moved to Washington, D.C. So this room is only half my stuff. The rest is in D.C. Hello, David Scarrat. Scarrat? I'm going to call you David. Welcome to the live stream. This is end of the year 2018. Time to celebrate. I was just telling Sack Attack that I'm moving out of Boston, so this will be no more future videos with this background. I still might save the Tatooine poster because I like it, but I'm gonna have to build a new background set for wherever I move in to DC. So yeah, it's been quite a year. The channel just really turned a corner in 2018. Went from 10,000 subscribers on January 2nd, 2018 to 65,000 last week. So kind of excited to see where 2019 goes. I have a whole editorial calendar planned of videos. I'm going to really try my best to stay on schedule. I really dropped the ball in December because of my semester getting away from me. But I am no longer teaching. I'm working full-time in DC, which means I will hopefully have extra time, because teaching takes a lot out of you. Lecture prepping, grading. So since I'll have a more steady 8 to 5 job, I'm pretty sure I can finally stick to a schedule. What else? I'm thinking of doing a live stream with the whole channel tonight too, as like an end of the year celebration, but I haven't decided yet. I've only done one channel-wide stream before, and they stress me out a little bit because I'm not accustomed to live streams. Yeah, I agree. And I've actually considered doing a video responding to Jordan Peterson's Bible lectures, because I see them as kind of a modern-day Joseph Campbell. And if you saw my video on the review of Crash Course Mythology, I think Joseph Campbell's kind of a not exactly academic. It's more literary, like literature studies, and not cultural studies, which religious studies focuses more on discrete cultures. So Jordan Peterson's universalizing of religion, I think, could be worth responding to. Kind of a critique of this is how a comparative religion scholar would think about the same things that Peterson talks about. But yeah, huge thirst for this kind of content. And I sometimes feel a little, what's the right word for this? Short on time and short on help to meet that thirst. You know, I can only do so many videos per month because I work full time. And yet there's so many topics to cover. Hey Brian, welcome. So yeah, huge potential for 2019. I'm going to try my best to buckle down. I feel like the channel is succeeding despite my bumbling, and I'm going to try to bumble less. I'd love to hear your guys' feedback, actually, on how I can improve the Patreon. I'm sometimes a little befuddled on how to treat the Patreon community. Like, I'll post stuff, but I don't really hear much feedback. And then sometimes people will drop their patronage and say, you know, they weren't getting the value they were expecting from it. So one of my goals for 2019 is to really improve the Patreon thing. Whether it's more regular live streams or more regular posts, like, I don't know what you guys want. Go as slow as you need. As much as people want content all the time, good content is all that matters. That's a good point. I never want to reach a point. If doing 4 videos a month means sacrificing quality, I'm not going to do that. But doing only 2 videos a month means they have to count. Like, so I do belabor over my videos. And, you know, 2 videos a month means only 24 a year, and there's so many topics. I want to cover everything. New and improved coffee mugs. That's a good idea. Actually, my supply is running low. I have my coffee mug right here. My supply is running low, so I need to order new ones anyway. I may as well design a new mug. So yeah, future topics. I'm really loving the cognitive study of religion. I've been hanging out with a lot of scientists that study religion from a cognitive evolutionary perspective. So the first 2 videos in 2019 are going to focus on that. Well, one of the 2 is more cognitive. I'm going to try to focus a little more on Eastern religions. So I had, you know, the video on the Baha'i faith. I want to do at least a few videos on Hinduism and Buddhism. So 2019 is going to be diversifying that. And I have 1 or 2 video game themed videos that I'm pretty excited about. So part of my 2019, you know, New Year's resolution, if you could call it that, is to schedule out. You know, I downloaded a really good calendar app. I've scheduled out the first 3 months of videos. I've already written the first 2 videos. Now it's just a matter of producing them. Yeah. I'm trying to get more scholarly collaborations going too. You know, having a few scholars collaborate on writing and editing my videos. Like, this is why I haven't done very many Eastern religions, because I'm not an expert on Hinduism and Buddhism, and I'm afraid to do videos on topics I'm not an expert on. So I'm going to try to loop in a scholar of Hinduism and a scholar of Buddhism to help me out on some of those videos. Sack Attack. I'm obviously just one guy, but I think don't go after the people who want to use Patreon like it's a commodity. Yeah, that's how I've kind of felt too. In my mind, you know, I support people on Patreon, and I support them not because of the perks. I support them because I believe in the content. I believe in the mission. And so I like to think a lot of the patrons support the mission of Religion for Breakfast, which is religious literacy. But at the same time, I do want to provide value. I like the thought of treating it like a community, you know, the Patreon community. I'm still learning that. You know, I'm not super savvy. I feel like I'm making this work, but I could be savvier. Welcome, Stratos. Greetings from Rome. Glad to hear you're in Rome. I was there 2 years ago. Love that city. I was in Jerusalem a few weeks ago. doing a talk for the State Department. Actually, that was pretty intense. They wanted to have like a conference of sorts on international religious freedom, and I was in town, and they were like, "Do you want to come talk about religious freedom in the United States context?" And I was like, "Sure." So that was fun. Brian, I'm backing you so that you can continue creating your main content. I don't need a reward. This isn't a track. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I'm glad to hear that, because that's how I've always treated Patreon. Stratos. Well, I mean, Eastern religions are not creedal like Christianity, where you recite a creed of beliefs. In Buddhism in particular, at least in the early 20th century, scholars thought of Buddhism as a philosophy, not a religion. So I kind of saw a Protestant bias in that interpretation. So I think Buddhism's a fun topic to cover, because at least in the American context, it breaks our stereotypes of what a religion should look like, because it is more focused on ritual. No, I came from my vacation. My permanent home is Malta. Well, Malta to Rome is a quick flight. I'm jealous. It's very cold here in Boston. Sactech says, I'd love to see some collaborations, especially with people you think are interesting. Yes, 100%. I have so many interesting people that I'm friends with, because I'm in this field of religious studies, that I want to bring on camera. Or this is where I've thought about the podcast, sitting down with them with 2 microphones and just talking for an hour. But it's a matter of getting them in the same room with me, at least for video. I've never liked the Skype interview video where their screen is on, their face is on screen as a Skype interview. I would rather sit down across from them. So yeah, collaboration is definitely happening. Actually, I can announce this. This is a upcoming collaboration. There's a think tank at Northeastern University here in Boston that just won a big grant, $750,000 from the Henry Luce Foundation, to train scholars of religion in talking to the public, training them how to write op-eds, how to interview on TV, and part of that grant is set aside for media partnerships between this think tank and media outlets. And I'm an acquaintance with the program director of this organization. It's called Sacred Rites, WRITES. And so I sat down with coffee with her, and I was like, hey, Religion for Breakfast would be a great media partnership. You fund 3 scholars to write 3 episodes and appear on screen with me, and we get 3 videos out of it. I get videos, they get training in how to talk on screen, how to write video scripts, and she agreed. So starting the first week of January, you'll notice on my Twitter that I'll be advertising a partnership between Sacred Rites and Religion for Breakfast, soliciting applications from scholars of religion who want to write for Religion for Breakfast. So 3 collaborations will be coming, probably sometime in April or May. I'm not sure what the topics will be yet. I'll have to be reading through probably several hundred applications, but it's stuff like that that I'm really excited about 2019. Because for me, Religion for Breakfast exists on one hand to educate the public about religion, and on the other hand to help elevate scholars of religion who have some super interesting research, but it just never makes it outside of academia. A lot of people are surprised to hear that religious studies is an actual academic field. So I'm kind of doing 2 sides of the coin here. Talk to the public and try to help scholars get to the public. You'll notice some of my videos are based on just one academic article, because I'll find a super interesting article in my research, think this needs to be better known, and then make a video about it. So that's the first of possibly several partnerships happening this year with academic institutions. Thank you for stopping by, Brian. Have a happy new year, and I'm sure we'll chat in future streams. Stratus says to be interesting on a series of how religions change through time and how they tend to merge and come close to each other. You know what? I've thought about this. One of the videos I want to do. So a lot of YouTubers are playing with long form videos. 30-minute. 30-minute big, interesting topics, and doing a deep dive. And I've thought of doing this with the topic of endangered religions. There are some religions with only a few hundred members that are slowly disappearing. I'm thinking about the Samaritans in Israel and the Palestinian territories, where there's only 800 Samaritans left in the world. And as far as I know, their numbers are declining. And I want to do like a 30-minute endangered religions mini documentary and kind of ask that question: what does it mean for a religion to be endangered? How is that similar and different from like an endangered language, for example? So there's certain languages disappearing, and people try to preserve them through audio recordings. They try to preserve them through educational efforts in the high schools or the middle schools, but you can't really do that with a religion. You can't record it with an audio recorder. You can't necessarily push it into a high school, at least not in a secular democracy. So there's this interesting, what I view as an interesting dilemma of endangered religions as kind of disappearing culture. So Stratos, your point about religions tending to merge, I was thinking how some religions tend to get gigantic, like Christianity and Islam, and others tend to dwindle away. And there's no real rhyme or reason for that. Maybe there is. That's what the documentary would do. So yeah, a few ideas for this year. Sack Attack, I do have a reading list. It's incomplete. Let me pull it up for you. It's on my Amazon shop. So I'm posting here a bunch of my book suggestions. So I consider that a reading list. It needs to be more robust. It's a lot of my own subfield of ancient Christianity, ancient Greco-Roman magic, a few religious literacy / religious studies pedagogy books. But, I'm going to write that down. I'm going to write down a note to myself to improve that reading list for 2019. Yeah. So, big year for the channel. Hoping for a big year in 2019. A little nervous about starting a new job in DC, but things are looking up. This is great. I'm glad so many people are in the chat. Sometimes these chats are kind of empty. So, what else? I'm writing a video. Oh, here's something. I'm writing a History of Religious Freedom in the United States series. It's going to be 10 episodes from the writing of the U.S. Constitution to the 21st century. I'm writing that for a grant. So Sack Attack asks if I have any sort of faith of myself. I don't usually talk about this on the channel, but I'm fine talking about it to the patrons. I don't know what to describe myself. I was raised evangelical in the U.S., so evangelical Christian, pretty conservative. Young Earth creationism, stuff like that. The Bible is inerrant, the inerrant Word of God. The more I studied ancient Christianity, the less I believed in that, so I went more liberal Christian, and I'm not sure where I stand now. I think a deist of some sort might be the best way to describe me. So yeah, in future years there might be some sort of reckoning when I finally decide what to define myself as, but I'm kind of a happy person, happily not defining myself. The reason why I don't bring it up on the channel is because I don't want to be pigeonholed or labeled as part of the atheist community or part of the Christian apologist community. Like there's these little communities on Facebook, on YouTube, and I want to be outside of those communities. I want both of those communities to watch my channel. And I also kind of want to perform the concept that you can study religion without being religious. Like when people say they study architecture, no one's like, "Oh, are you a building? Why would you ever study architecture and not be a building?" It sounds silly, but that's like an assumption with religious studies. Oh, you must be religious, or you must have some sort of religious identity or anti-religious identity to motivate your study of this topic. And I'm like, no, I'm interested in human culture. I'm interested in history and politics and philosophy, all the humanities, and religion's a huge aspect of culture. So I see the personal faith as kind of, yeah, the moment someone thinks they're on their side. Exactly. So like, I don't want it to come across as dodgy. I just don't bring it up. Like, hey, let's talk about, for example, what's a good example? Kind of like maybe the video on Emperor Constantine didn't really have that much to do with forming the New Testament canon. A lot of people accuse me of being like a Catholic apologist trying to defend the Holy Spirit inspiring the canon. And I'm like, no, you're wrong on that account. I just happen to look at the historical data and shows that Constantine was not that heavily involved. But then when I talk about stuff like strict religions and why people might join a strict religion, people then accuse me of being an atheist that's diagnosing religious people's brains. And I'm just like, I'm just studying this stuff as a scholar. Some of it is, it's empirical data that you can study. And there's just kind of the cynicism on YouTube that your channel must be motivated by some sort of ideology. It's a highly polarized platform that almost rewards radicalization. If I came out as like the super atheist and suddenly we're doing super atheist for breakfast here, I think the channel would blow up overnight because I would become a pundit overnight. But I don't want to be a pundit. I want to be an educator. That's what I am at heart. So yeah, that's a long answer to your question. I will say that I don't think my personal thoughts about the supernatural motivate my scholarship. To me, it's a non-issue. So yeah, series on religious freedom. I'm writing a longer series on an introduction to religion in 10 videos, and the videos would be thematic. So one video would be on spirits, one video would be on ritual, one video would be on clergy. So these big cross-cultural categories: scripture, clergy, pilgrimage, and introduce religion through themes as opposed to traditions. So I'm writing that with a friend of mine, actually. I don't know if it's ever going to be produced. It's going to require some sort of funding, but that's next on my list too. But how much knowledge do you have on religions before writing with things like the Hebrew Bible? Before writing, like we're talking Neolithic, Paleolithic, and in that situation, like for those topics, I'm fascinated by that. And my only exposure to Paleolithic religion has been my research I've done for my 2 videos on that topic. So the video on Göbekli Tepe, the supposedly oldest temple in the world, and the video on animal sacrifice, the history of animal sacrifice. So Paleolithic religion I've studied quite a bit. And yeah, so religion before settled agrarian societies is very different. It's a lot of guesswork. Kind because then you're relying on anthropologists. Like historians are out of the picture at that point. You have osteologists who are experts on bones. You have architectural experts that can study stuff like Stonehenge. Ritual theorists trying to theorize what ritual looks like outside of a society with writing. I do not envy those scholars because they have so little data. You have to write an entire book on like a few campfires and pieces of rock. At least when I study Greco-Roman religion, I have texts and inscriptions and a lot of data from places like Pompeii and Ephesus. And Paleolithic religion is one of those, I think, wide open fields where you can just almost say anything and try your best to support your theory. I think it could actually draw on a lot of cognitive studies too, evolutionary cognitive study of religion, because then you're trying to, what's the word? Like agency detection. That some anthropologists think that the earliest religion was humans' tendency to ascribe agency to non-agental things, like a tree or wind or animals. So hearing the branches brushing against each other and the wind whistling through them, and you then start ascribing agency to the wind as some sort of wind spirit. So there's a whole field of agency detection theorists who would study Paleolithic religion, but they're not necessarily studying ancient sites. They're studying how humans think. So that's one way to study it. And then the rest, what I've just described, so anthropology. I have a friend who studies anthropology in Alaska, so his dissertation is on a Paleolithic site. I think it's Neolithic, a Neolithic site on the Aleutian Islands, and I don't envy his research. He has to camp out on an Aleutian Island with a rifle to protect himself from bears, and studies rocks and charcoal, and writes a dissertation on it. So that is one way to do your PhD. Yeah, that would be fun. Origins of religion. That should be a 30-minute video. That shouldn't be a short video. And that's something a lot of scholars tried to do in the early 20th century. Have you read The Great Shift by James Kugel? Not exactly connected. I have not. I'm going to Google him right now, though. The Great Shift, James Kugel. Ugh. Encountering God in Biblical Times. An inquiry into how the contemporaries of Solomon and Sheba viewed the presence of the deity and why the reality of that highly personal divine. That sounds cool. I mean, kind of like a history of God, history of Yahweh book, I'm assuming. Let's see this guy's credentials. Oof, $200 commentary on Jubilees. Yeah, nope. Oh, he's a scholar. You say not exactly. Oh, the book's not academic. Okay, I thought you were saying he wasn't an academic. Bar Ilan University. Yeah. I've never visited Bar Ilan, but I've been to a lot of universities in Israel when I was there last. Tel Aviv, Hebrew University. They're all really good scholars. Yeah, I mean, I was trying to get at this topic with my video on Did Yahweh Have a Wife? Trying to just to introduce people to the idea that our concept of God, the Christian concept of God and the Jewish concept of God, has a history, and that history stretches back to Iron Age and Bronze Age, Levantine coast. Yeah. Interesting topic. I feel like I've studied it so much that I'm not super interested anymore, but people are into that topic, so it deserves another video. You know, maybe the title could be God Has a History. Yahweh Has a History. Oh, how to relate to a deity. There's another book like that, but it's in a modern Christian context. Oh, what is it called? I think it's When God Speaks. No, that's not it. When God Talks Back? Yeah, okay. You should look this book up. It's by Tanya Luhrmann. When God Talks Back, Understanding the American Evangelical Relationship with God. So American evangelicals often talk about having a personal relationship with God and how God speaks to them to, go on the missions field. All very interesting, ethnographic research went into this book, and how American evangelicals talk about their relationship with God. So she's an anthropologist. That book is just straight up anthropology that is similar to what you were just talking about. I need to read it again. I'd love to read that book again. I've also, let's see. I kind of want to get into some more pop culture topics too. Someone suggested a Game of Thrones video, and it's coming out this coming April, so I'm thinking of doing that. Some sort of... I want to have an interesting angle, though. I don't want to just say, this is where he got, what real-world religions inspired Game of Thrones' religions. I want something more of a hook. Scrolling through questions again. It's hard for me to monologue. Who are your favorite YouTubers? No, I definitely watch a lot of YouTube. I watch a lot of YouTube. So I love Philosophy Tube. Ollie Thorne is that YouTuber. Philosophy Tube I've been watching for years. He basically does he used to do introductory videos on philosophy. Now he does more interesting long form, almost theatrical commentaries on modern society with a philosophical angle to it. I watch a lot of political YouTube. I don't want to get too much into politics, but I try to balance. I try to watch like conservative YouTubers and then watch liberal YouTubers and kind of see how they're both talking about these current issues. So I'm an American, very into American politics, and I don't want to be siloed into one perspective. So I watch the David Pakman show, but I also watch the Dave Rubin show. I watch ContraPoints, who's more of a left-wing cultural commentary channel, a lot of gender and sexuality topics. I watch a lot of Super Smash Brothers channels because that's my favorite video game. So a lot of the top players in the world, I follow their channels. Strato says, latest trend is how religions are a copy and paste or plagiarism of... Yeah, I hate these terms. Like, when people say, oh, Christmas is just a copy of Saturnalia or something like that, I'm like, that's kind of how culture works. Culture picks up on... Like, there's this term, cultural memory. Like, there's a reason why men have been wearing collared shirts for over 100 years now, because you have this cultural momentum. So, yeah, all religions have aspects of previous older cultures, and this is kind of to think historically. When I got my history major, my professors would say, think in the two terms of change and continuity. What has changed and what has continued. So any religion, there's change and continuity. With Christianity, the continuity would be the Hebrew Bible, water rituals, like all these things from Judaism continued into Christianity. But then there was some change too, like the concept of this guy Jesus is the Messiah. So yeah, that's kind of my thought. Having said that, I do feel like I missed an opportunity to do a video on Saturnalia just a week ago. Jonathan, I actually don't know this fellow. Jonathan Paglia? How do you say that? Exploring symbolism and religion. Oh, another YouTuber that talks about religion? Interesting. I am creating YouTube, exploring symbolism, religion, art as well, exploring the patterns, experience. Let's see. Interesting. I do not know this guy's channel. I'll have to poke through it. James Belo. I don't know this guy either. I'm feeling ignorant here. Welcome, welcome. I recommend reading Plato and Theodoret. Ah, yeah. I think you mentioned this on Twitter, didn't you? I love Theodoret. I cite Theodoret a lot in my dissertation. Eastern Orthodox icon carver. That's cool. And associated with Jordan Peterson. That is random. Associated in the sense of like same, you know, same niche, or do they actually know each other? Yeah, and Angela, you've mentioned before that I should do more videos on paganism in general. And I definitely want to do that. I think one way I could do that would be talking about converting the Parthenon from a temple to Athena to a Christian church. You know, at least that would be my expertise. Would be like the Christianization of the Greco-Roman world. Interesting. I will have to look at this guy's channel. But yeah, I have a ton of footage on from the Parthenon and from the Temple of Hephaestus, you know, on the bottom of the slopes of the Acropolis. So a lot of that footage I could bring into a video on Christianizing the pagan world and how that's more complicated than some people think. The Good Book by Peter Gomes. Let's look this guy up too. People within it, yeah, I mean, this goes back to charismatic leadership. You know, Max Weber, a scholar of religion, a sociologist in the early 20th century, talks about charismatic leaders, holy men, and messianic figures. Like, people within a religion can be huge. You know, St. Paul comes to mind, but even on a more micro scale, think about, I'm going to talk about American evangelicalism because that's what I know a lot about from my background, but there's this guy called Francis Schaeffer who's kind of like a philosopher, and he did this huge documentary on Western civilization and how postmodernism is kind of crumbling the fabric of absolute truth in the United States. And Francis Schaeffer was a huge influence on American evangelicalism. This was all in the 70s, I think. So this one guy, through his very influential documentary, influenced a whole generation of evangelical Christians, and his ideas made it into Christian colleges, where they started teaching about worldviews and how you have to have the correct worldview, a biblical worldview. So definitely, there can definitely be like movers and shakers that are just like one person. And these are all insiders in a tradition. Peter Gomes, American preacher, theologian, oh, a professor at Harvard Divinity School. That is literally a mile from my house right now. A mile away. I have a lot of friends at Harvard Divinity School. 20th century scholar Francis Schaeffer. Let me just make sure I'm spelling that correctly. Francis Schaeffer. There we go. That guy. Look him up. Hugely influential. Like, his influence continues to resound in American evangelicalism, even if they don't know it. Like, if you are a 20-year-old evangelical here in the U.S., you have been you have learned some of his philosophy. Yeah, I'm actually not sure how big of his influence goes beyond evangelicalism, just because I was in the evangelical world. My history teacher was showing me his documentaries, so I know that world. I'm sure he was influential outside of that world too. Yeah, the L'Abri community. I don't know. He founded these communities called L'Abri, and one of them's in Switzerland. There's another one outside Boston here. Like, I have friends who have attended these kind of Francis Schaeffer inspired intellectual communities. It's interesting. It's a very interesting movement. I think one day, like maybe 5 years from now, I'll do like a pseudo-autobiographical series on American evangelicalism, and like do a video on young earth creationism. Like, why do American evangelicals believe this? And then have a video on Francis Schaeffer, then have a video on, I don't know, Republican politics and evangelicalism. Because a lot of these things I was brought up in, and it's very interesting to me to study it as an academic now and recognize the cultural influence that was kind of exerted on me in that culture. I think that would be a great personal journey for me, just to study that academically. Popularization of his work is pretty popular in the evangelical. Yeah, I think you're probably right. That it was the whole English-speaking world. His son has kind of become a strident repudiator of his dad's work. Very disgruntled ex-evangelical, kind of atheist blogger or speaker of some sort now. So that's kind of an interesting story in and of itself. Probably deserves its own study. All right, Jonathan. I will reach out to Jonathan. Well, I'll have to look at his videos first, but yeah, I was not. I mean, I remember being impressed in high school. I was like, oh wow, this guy really knows what he's talking about, but I haven't really looked into it. Yeah, does anyone know any other religious studies-esque YouTube channels? I try to keep an eye out for them, but a lot of them do seem to be more mythology focused. than religious studies focused. Yeah, because if he studies symbolism, oh yeah, he appeared on Rebel Wisdom, which is definitely the intellectual dark web type channels. Symbolism of the Christmas tree. Problem with monotheism. So he definitely talks a lot about religion. Sacred space in secular terms. Wonder if he talks about Eliade there. All right, well, I will be very curious. Oh, wow. David Brackey was on a channel. I'd love to have David Brackey on my channel. Yeah, I've met Brackey once. He's good friends with my dissertation advisor. He's just one of those preeminent scholars. He's just such a badass. All right, Stratos, welcome. Thank you. Hope you have fun in Rome on your vacation. And I will hopefully see you next year on another live stream. Take care. All right, there's a lot of David Brackey interviews. One of my videos pops up because I cite him. Wow, Jonathan Pajot's YouTube channel or Patreon is insanely big. Good for him. Yeah, I'll have to watch some of these. See where he fits. It looks like he's only been making videos regularly for a year or so. Interesting. YouTube is just so big. There's just so many corners that you just constantly discover new corners. Yeah, look at that. He has a whole website on icon carving. That's really, really interesting. Huh. I'm going to give a 15-minute warning here. I'm supposed to give a tour of my room to a prospective housemate in 15 minutes because since I'm moving, I need to get rid of this room and fill it with a new tenant. So, all right, Sactac, thank you. Thank you for the great questions. Have a happy new year to you too. Thanks for giving me some YouTube suggestions. I have a lot of watching to do. And I'll see y'all next year. I don't know who that leaves us with. David's still here. Angelo's still here, I think. It says 5 are watching. I guess one question could be, should I do a end of the year stream with the whole channel? I'm always hesitant to do that, but I feel like it would be poetic ending to the year. Do like a questions and answers session. Thanks, Angelo. I'm looking forward to DC. It's a fun city, believe it or not. I'll be packing all my stuff on Monday. Everything you see behind me. It still says 5 people are watching. Huh. Well, if you're still here, feel free to chat. Otherwise, I'll just keep talking. Is the dissertation finished? It is not, unfortunately. It is not. I'm really aiming to be done by the summer. There's a big early Byzantine library in Washington, D.C. called Dumbarton Oaks. Dumbarton Oaks is run by Harvard, and I have special access to their library. So my idea is, you know, I work 8 to 5, eat dinner, and then be at Dumbarton by 6 o'clock, write from 6 to 9, head home, fall asleep, do it all over again. It's really my only chance to finish this dissertation by the summer. It's kind of ironic. I might get more research done there in DC than I have here in Boston, because Boston University's library is not very good for my field. It kind of boggles my mind, because like my thesis advisor is, you know, the top scholar in Greco-Roman magic and early Christianity, which is what I study, but the library holdings are terrible. So, having said that, I hope to get a lot of research done. I need to get like a regimented schedule, like pack my dinner, pack my lunch, you know, cope with the idea that I'm going to be out from 8 to 9 every day. It's probably the same. I think the Dumbarton Oaks library calls it Byzantine, but they may be used to call it medieval. But yeah, it's probably the same thing. Harvard funds them, so if you work for Dumbarton, you are technically a Harvard University employee. So yeah, almost like a satellite campus. It's like a satellite Harvard campus for a bunch of early Byzantine, early Christianity scholars. It's kind of funny. I almost got a fellowship to study there. I was in the last 5, and they decided not to take me. But I do have friends who have studied there on a research fellowship. So yeah, pretty high hopes that I can get this writing done. It's kind of holding me back at this point. Like I should have had this dissertation done a year ago, but I just keep getting sidetracked by study abroad in Israel and do the YouTube channel and start working full time. Like all these things have slowed me down, but like I need to finish it. You know, I've been working on it for years. But even my first book ideas are not my dissertation. So I'm like, I have books I want to write, and my dissertation's holding me back because I need to write that one first. All right, we're going to do, let's say, 5-minute warning, just so it gives me enough time to get ready for this house showing. Yeah, so if I have a 5-year goal, 5-year goal is finish the dissertation in 1 year, write my first book 2nd year, 3rd year, I don't know what I'd do with 3rd year. Maybe start doing online classes with the channel, I don't know. Yeah, David, so you know the struggle. I can't imagine writing this thing with kids. I'm not married, I do not have kids, so I have no excuse. My only excuse is I get sidetracked by other projects. Other projects that are easier to do and more fun to do. Like, oh, of course I should write another paragraph in the dissertation, or I could write another YouTube script. And I always pick the second. I'm gonna, New Year's resolution, finish the dissertation. This will be the year that Mr. Henry becomes Dr. Henry. Do you regret not finishing yours? I feel like it reaches a point where people just don't care about it anymore. I still care enough. It is kind of a nuisance, and I don't seem to be going... You know, I've applied for a lot of academic jobs. If I was offered an academic position, I would have a real incentive to finish it. But, sorry to hear that. Yeah, I need to finish it. I would really regret it. All right, I'm going to start wrapping up. Thank you everyone for joining. This was a very successful... Oh, that's annoying. Yeah, advisors need to take their students with them. Thank you everyone for showing up. This was a great end of the year chat. Solid 5 or 6 people in the chat. I will see you all on the other side. The other side of 2018. And here's to a very successful 2018 for the channel, and here's to a very successful 2019. I will see you guys around.